What is man? This is a very interesting question that I will try to answer as quick as possible about man. You see, it's a very important question because man has been trying to understand why man is here, why are we here. But perhaps it's also important to understand our nature. Maybe it can help us understand why we're here. So I'm going to start from Genesis chapter 1 because this is the first time man is mentioned in the whole of the Bible. Genesis chapter 1 verse 26. And God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth. Yes, that's 26. But if you go to 27, just after 26, it says, so God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. I want you to observe something. 26, it says, let us make man in our image. But 27, it says, God created man in his own image. Who's the us? Who was he referring to as us? Now I'm going to show you something very deep that many people missed. If you go to Genesis 1 verse 20, and God said, let the water bring forth abundantly the moving creatures that had life. Then if you move to 24, and God said, let the earth bring forth the living creatures after his kind. If you take note in Genesis chapter 1 before 26, God only spoke to two things, the water and the earth. So when he was referring to us in 26, this is just after 24, after speaking to the earth. 26, he said, let us make man in our image. The us here means God, the water, and the earth. Stay with me. I'm sure you've heard something different in the past, but I'm going to show you something. It says in 27, God created man in his own image. Now, what is the image of God? You go to John 4 verse 24, it says God is what? A spirit. Take note that there's a difference between making something and creating something. Creation is a spiritual concept. Making is a physical concept. To make something, you have to bring different elements together and put it together to create. You really don't need any prior element. So God created man in his image. Man was created as a spirit. If you want proof, you go to Genesis 2. God had finished creating the earth, creating so many things. And if you check Genesis 2 verse 5, and every plant of the field before it was in the earth, and every herb of the field before it grew, for the Lord had not caused it to rain upon the earth, and there was not a man to till the ground. Pay attention, in Genesis 1 verse 27, he has already created man, but in Genesis 2 verse 5, there was no man to till the earth. That is because man is a spirit. Now, this is where it gets very clear. In verse 6, Genesis 2 verse 6, it says, but there went up mist from the earth. Mist is what? Water. And watered the whole face of the ground, the earth. And the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground. Pay attention. Water and what? The dust, the earth, coming together for God to do what? Form man. Give man what? A shape. Form. Form has to do with physical. Now let's get back to Genesis 1:26, where it says us. You know, I told you it was the water and what? The earth that God was speaking to when he said us. Now pay attention. God already created the spirit man, but now God formed the body from where? The water and the earth. That's why when the body dies, it goes back there. So you have to understand what Genesis was trying to tell you. Man is created as a spirit, but pay attention that God had to form a body, and then God breathed into the nostrils of the body the breath of life. What God did there was to put the spirit man inside the body. I want you to write something down. There's a difference between man and human. Human is a word taken from two other words, man and what? Hue. Hue means color. By literal definition, human is referring to the flesh, the body, the physical body. So man is a spirit in what? A physical body. So many people don't understand this concept. And this misunderstanding, this ignorance has caused a lot of problem. This is why so many people think they are the flesh. You have to understand the difference between the two, the flesh and what? The man. So if you check Genesis 1:26 or Genesis 1:27, it says, and God created man, female, and 28 it says, bless them, and he told them to be fruitful, multiply, replenish the earth, subdue it, and have what? Dominion. So at this point in time, there was no physical man. So the man he gave the charge to was the spirit, and he put the spirit inside the body, which means the body was a tool for the man to use to have what? Dominion. It is because of this misunderstanding people take identity with their body, not their spirit. Let me explain further. In the words of Jesus in John 6, it is the spirit that does what? Quickeneth the flesh. Pay attention. Until the spirit entered the body, it says man became what? A living soul. Before the spirit was in the body, it was a dead soul. You have to understand this concept, the difference between what? The flesh and the man. So that's why they say the flesh has its own desires. It was taken from this earth. The flesh has its own desire. The flesh knows. Let me say this. Let me just say this. The flesh has his own mind, his own intentions, his own desires, his own longing, his own lust. The spirit has his own. But because people don't know who they are and don't know their spirits, so they take after the flesh. They are taking orders from the flesh. They think that when the flesh desires something, it is their own desire. This is what's going on everywhere around the world. People are operating in the flesh instead of their own spirit. And the flesh is a very tricky substance. The flesh, from the moment the flesh is born, it knows that it has a day to die. Because it's running against time, the flesh is constantly trying to have as much fun as possible before it goes. The flesh is trying to own as many things as possible before it dies. That's why they say humans cannot be what? Satisfied. The flesh cannot be satisfied. The flesh cannot be satisfied. This is why people have billions but cannot be satisfied. Why? Because they have taken their identity with what? The flesh, not with who? The spirit. Them, the real them, created what? In the image of God. My point I'm trying to make here is that man is a spirit given a flesh. You have to understand the difference between the two. You have to know who you are when you look in the mirror. You see, the flesh is not perfect. There's always a fault with the flesh. This is why people are depressed. Somebody is depressed because her body is too slim. Another one is depressed because her body is too fat. Because the flesh cannot be perfect. But you, whose spirit was created in the image of God, was already made perfect. The moment you understand the difference, you're going to look at yourself, your small boobs in the mirror, and not be sad. It's because people qualify themselves in this flesh. That's why you see a black woman trying to get a Puerto Rican woman's hair, and a white woman trying to turn her body black. You can never be satisfied the moment you are functioning and operating in the consciousness that you are the flesh. Spirits don't need cars. It's your flesh that need the car. It's your flesh that is chasing the new shoes, the new Nikes, the new Adidas. It's your flesh chasing the new wristwatch, the new Rolex. It's not what? Your spirit can wear it. And the funny thing about the flesh is that it can never be satisfied. You might paint your nails blue. In the next 2 hours, you're wondering, what if the middle one is green and the one on the left, the extreme left, is yellow? There's too many things that you can do with the flesh for you to be able to be satisfied. That's why people are in despair. That's why people are depressed. Everything that brings depression has to do with the insatisfaction of the flesh. Take note, the flesh came from the earth. It's always hungry for things from the earth. Where did they make the cars from? The wristwatch. It's always hungry for physical gratification, but the spirit, the things that satisfy the spirit is what? Joy, peace, righteousness. Anything in the physical cannot satisfy. But you see, because people don't know that they are spirits, they operate consciously in the flesh. That's why there's a difference between what's being spiritually minded and being carnally minded. Carnally minded is when you're operating in the flesh, you are taking orders from the flesh. Spiritually minded is when you allow your spirit man, the real you, be in charge, the one in the image of God. I just want to leave you with the understanding today, if you get anything from this message, is that you are not the flesh. You are a spirit created in the image of God, given a flesh as a tool. In fact, let me paint the perfect picture for so many people's lives today. Imagine a carpenter given a hammer. The carpenter is the spirit man, the hammer is the flesh, the tool. And then you put this carpenter in a furniture workshop to make a chair or a stool. And then you come back, and then it's the hammer that is dictating to the carpenter. What a funny sight that would be. You enter a workshop, and then you see the hammer using the carpenter to drive the nail. Is that not madness? That is exactly what's happening to so many people. You are a spirit being given a flesh as a tool to have dominion, but instead of you using the tool, the flesh is now using you. The flesh is now dictating everything. The flesh now defines what is value. Meanwhile, the spirit is after happiness, joy, fulfillment, spiritual things. But the flesh is after what? Car, money. They are not bad. But all those things, everything that comes from the physical is a tool for you to use to fulfill your assignment here in this physical world. You are a spirit sent to this physical world to fulfill an assignment. Just make sure you are not the carpenter who the hammer is controlling. Just make sure that your flesh is not controlling you. That your spirit, the real you, is in charge, the you that was created in the image of God and in his likeness. You have to understand that the flesh and the spirit will always fight against one another. Your flesh will always try to override your spirit, will always try to push for his agenda, for his own lust. If you check Galatians 5, from verse 16 says, "This I say then, walk in the spirit, and ye shall not fulfill what? The lust of the flesh." Many people are fulfilling the lust of their flesh because they are not aware that they are the spirit. They think they are the flesh, so anything the flesh says, they think that's their own nature, they think that's their own idea. If you go to 17 of Galatians 5, for the flesh lusteth against the spirit, and the spirit against the flesh. These are contrary the one to another, so that ye cannot do the things that ye would. Simply saying that the flesh and the spirit, they don't have the same agenda. 18. But if ye be led of the spirit, you are not under the law. Now, if you go to 19, Galatians 5 is trying to explain the things that the flesh is after. The lust of the flesh, what the flesh wants to do. It says what? Now the works of the flesh are manifest, which are these: adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lasciviousness, idolatry, witchcraft, hatred, variance, emulation, wrath, strife, sedition, heresy, envy, murder, drunkenness, reveling, and such likes. These are the kind of things that the flesh will go after. These are the things that the flesh manifests. Envy. Your flesh sees another person with a car more expensive than your own. Gets jealous. The flesh cannot be satisfied. The flesh cannot be satisfied. But if you go to verse 22 of chapter 5 of Galatians, it says, but the fruit of the Spirit is what? Love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. Against such there is no law. There's nobody that can judge you wrongly for the things that your spirit man, which was formed and fashioned in the image of God, is after. So from today, you need to understand that you are a spirit created in the image of God. You are not the flesh. You have to understand that the flesh is the human, the colored man, and the man is the spirit. When the spirit leaves, what you are left with is what? A dead body. So the spirit, the real you, is what is important and must always be in charge.